Hi there, and welcome to One Idea Away, not just a podcast, but a community and ongoing conversation meant to inspire and empower individuals to live more fully, deeply, and consciously. Let's jump into today's episode right now. Hey there again, everyone. As you know, we talk from time to time about talk. That's right, about conversations and about communication. And we dive into this issue in just numerous ways. And today, it just felt right to make an admissions to you, to share something I haven't shared before. It's a little secret. You see, I have a voice that lives inside my head. And I've got a second secret. We all do. It's that self-talk. It's that, at times, that inner critic. At times, it's just the rambling thoughts that are running through our mind at any given moment. And that comes through as part of our inner self-talk. And that inner self-talk is something that's really critical for us to be able to understand, because it affects so much about what we continue to see and how it is that we continue to feel and what it is that we continue to believe about the experience that we happen to be living in at this moment. And so today I wanted to bring somebody on who could really help us understand this self-talk and what to do with it and how to even re-engineer it at times, as if that's what we need. And so I went out and we found one of the authors who literally wrote the book on some of this, as you hear me say quite often on this show. And so I'm delighted to have as our guest today, Cynthia Kane. Cynthia is the author of How to Communicate Like a Buddhist, and her latest book, which was just released, is called Talk to Yourself Like a Buddhist. She's a certified meditation and mindfulness instructor dedicated to helping men and women change their communication routines so they feel in control of their words and understood at home and work. Her work has been featured in the Washington Post, BBC Travel, Yoga Journal, Women's Day, and so much more. She offers workshops, private coaching, and a certification program in intentional communication. And with that, Cynthia, thank you so much for coming on One Idea Away.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. So one of the places that I like to begin is to give an umbrella, so to speak, to the conversation and really what's at the heart of your own work. And so what is it that you would say is the chief idea, the core message that you want others to really understand is at the heart of your work and your writings?
It's a wonderful question. I think for me, what is really at the heart is the idea that our lives are completely dictated by the way that we communicate. So how I talk to myself, how I interact with myself is a direct reflection of how I will interact with others and the world. And the idea being that if we can change the way that we interact with ourselves, we can really change how we interact with others and the world itself.
It's really interesting because it does seem like that inner self-talk, there's this, ongoing narration of everything that we seem to go through in life. And when we have that inner narrator, exactly as you say, it's so influential on how we feel and thus obviously how we interact with others. I do obviously want to dive into the heart of that. Just before we do, I am curious how, why this book, meaning why this book for you? How did this come about as something you really wanted to be able to share and to talk about with the world?
Well, I used to be a horrible communicator. I was very passive aggressive and very reactionary. I would get overwhelmed very easily, roll my eyes, and, I slammed a lot of cupboard doors and things of that nature. And I had been with my first love for about 7.5 years, and we separated and then came back together. And 2 months after we came back together, he passed away unexpectedly. And it really threw me into a very dark place, and I was really looking for support and a way to feel better. And what I found through this search was that if I wanted to enjoy my time here, then I was going to have to change the way that I interacted with it. And that began with with me. And so I went on, a lot of lectures, went to a lot of lectures, seminars, read a lot of books, and kind of called together this practice of communication that has really changed my life. And the focus really on how we talk to ourselves is the first step in how we can, enjoy our lives, our relationships, our way of being. And so for me, the practice has changed my day to day, based solely on shifting the way that I talk to myself. And a lot of it came through really being introduced to the elements of right speech in Buddhism, and seeing that as a guide that I could live by, and trying to understand, okay, how then can I make this a practice? How then can I really be honest and not exaggerate and stop gossiping and use helpful language? And so that's where really the practice was born for me.
It's part of this journey. I know that in getting to hear a little bit of your background and some of the stories, some of the journey that has led you here, and unfortunately the tragedy that you did go through, I know part of what you also shared in that was that you came to a realization that while so many other people were trying to help you, that they couldn't. They were not the ones who were able to. And I'm just kind of curious, because to turn to and find that idea of inner self-talk and to focus on communication in that type of manner is a wonderful insight. And it's something that does open up so much for so many. And I guess I'm just kind of curious of what was it that introduced you to it? Kind of what was it within the work you were doing or the practice or otherwise helped you recognize that in changing the self-talk through right speech was like the thing for you?
The thing for me. Really, it came from trying it out one day. That was my first step. I remember really just wanting somebody to come in and give me the steps to feeling better.
Sure. So
that I could just take that and go with it. And it was when I was trying to implement a lot of different, strategies, that I realized the way that I was talking to myself, even about feeling better, was affecting the way that I was approaching implementation.
Yeah.
And so I decided, okay, I'm just going to start to pay attention to what I'm saying to myself and see where I'm at. And I started writing everything down. And what I noticed was how cruel I was. I was in a very, very low place, and my inner self-talk was not compassionate. I was really not being kind with myself or gentle, but speaking more to myself of, you should be over this by now, or you don't need to spend so much time being sad, right? And I just said to myself, okay, I'm just going to start with one day, and I'm going to see if I can be honest and be kind and be helpful to myself and see what happens. And I will tell you, that was really an incredible moment for me, because the day was lighter. It was brighter. Yeah. It suddenly felt like, even though things weren't necessarily okay, they were getting there, right? Yeah. There was choice. Suddenly there was hope. And that for me was really where I said, this is it. This is my way of becoming alive again.
Yeah. So for everybody listening, I just want to draw two things out here. One is just that importance of experimenting, right? Try something on, and as you move through these different steps, or whatever it is that you're going through right now, whatever it is that you happen to be shifting through, or whatever it is that you're even just working on, is when we experiment, and have a little bit of fun and curiosity within that experimentation, we'll find things that click. But it does require you to really try it on and to recognize, am I really giving it a shot? Or am I just kind of going through the motions? And that's, Cynthia, something you add in there. So key is really taking a look, an honest look at that. And you recognized your self-talk was kind of giving it away. And for everybody else, when Cynthia used the term, I used the term right speech. And I just wanted to add one little clarifier, and Cynthia, please expand on this, is that for those, if you do not have a background either in mindfulness or Buddhism or anything along those lines, right speech is not just simply like black and white, good and bad in terms of this is the way you got to do it. It's about being skillful with your talk and being skillful with your language and the way you communicate and skillful with the way you communicate with others, so that you are being intentional and deliberate and moving things forward in a manner that is honest and it is in integrity and it does move you forward. It's also not about being Pollyanna and overly positive. It's not it either. Cynthia, was there anything you wanted to kind of add to that to help people understand that idea of right speech and what, the depth of what you're really truly getting at?
I think that it also, you can categorize it as the 4 principles really being, to tell the truth, to not exaggerate, to not gossip, and to use helpful language. Mm. And so, but it is true. It's not about, going to the extremes. It really is finding the balance. Yeah. And in paying attention to how we're interacting and doing so in a friendly way, a non-judgmental attention. Mm. Mm.
So now let me bring us back one more time and truly just what is self-talk? Where does it come from? Why do we have this narrator that's just constantly running around our heads?
I think self-talk comes from our past experiences. It comes from the society that we live in. It comes from this feeling often that there's not enough to go around, especially I'm speaking of negative self-talk. Mm-hmm. And negative self-talk, really the way that I define it, is any type of talk that promotes suffering.
Yeah.
And I think it's something we are just conditioned to have, and it's there to help us if we let it lead us, showing us where we really need to focus our attention, and to dig a little deeper. Or it can be something that really creates a lot of fear and frustration and can lead us down, paths that we don't necessarily respect and we feel frightened by.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when a lot of those cycles kick off, they also become very much reinforcing with our language, right? Our language can kind of build these walls and these boundaries around what we even notice and what we see, and it kind of keeps us locked in that type of regard, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. You already shared one of them, and I just wanted you to elaborate a little bit further on how can we begin to just simply become more aware of what our self-talk is today?
Really, it's listening to yourself. It's paying attention to the words that you're using while you're using them. Words, when I say words here, I mean really your thoughts. Mm. And also, sometimes we speak to ourselves aloud, and oftentimes in moments of frustration or stress, really paying attention to what you're saying to yourself aloud and the thoughts that are going through your mind is the first real step, is to really become aware, because without that awareness, there isn't anything that we can change. Mm-hmm. And then it moves into exploring where the self-talk can come from, where that judgment comes from, because the majority of our self-talk is partnered with a judgment or a criticism. And again, I'm talking about negative self-talk here. Yeah. And so first, starting to pay attention to the thoughts that you're thinking about yourself, and especially in stressful moments, and then begin to pay attention to where this thought comes from, right? exploring maybe past experiences or, magazines or TV shows or the notion that we're less than someone else or, this idea of scarcity in a way. And really starting to just brainstorm, right? Where this thought could come from. And then my favorite part of it all is moving into the questioning. Once you've been able to identify a certain thought that you think often that is making you feel badly, and you start exploring where it comes from potentially, and then you move into questioning. So what is the actual judgment that you're making of yourself? And what's the story, right, that you're telling yourself as a result of this judgment? And those are two really powerful questions, because what they help us do is they help us kind of distance ourselves a little bit. And then moving into the last question, which is, what do I know to be true? And this is one of my most favorite questions, because what it helps us do is it helps us come back to the present moment. And the present moment is where we live. The present moment is where we create. It's where the thoughts that we are mulling over that are making us feel pain or sadness, they kind of disappear in a way, because it's not in the present moment. Oftentimes. So we ask ourselves questions, and then we move into potentially releasing the negative self-talk by noticing how forgiveness plays a big part of how we get anywhere or how we move forward. And then only kind of after that practice can you move into figuring out how to balance the self-talk. So really getting to that place of questioning, is what I'm about to say to myself true, right? Is what I'm about to say to myself helpful? Is what I'm about to say to myself kind? And learning really then how to shift the actual language that you're using. Yeah. So I think starting out, it really, the biggest piece, I would begin with is just the simple questioning of, is what I'm about to say to myself true, kind, and helpful? Is what I'm saying to myself true, kind, and helpful?
What I think you realize is that this show is about beginning a conversation. That's why from week to week, we're sharing the stories and insights, the wisdom and the practices that come out of these interviews and these extraordinary guests, because it's about how do we move that forward. So how do we continue that conversation, specifically to see how this can make a meaningful difference in our lives and in our relationships and within our careers. This is about taking it forward, not allowing these episodes to just be a moment in time, but to allow them to really, truly begin to affect your life. And so I want to invite you to join One Idea Away. And don't worry, the membership is free. Just go to oneideaaway.com/join. You see, when you do that, you're going to get access to a couple of things. First is that every single week you will get that correspondence, the email from us to let you know what's going on. But in it, I share different personal stories and insights, things that are going on for me on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. And so you're going to start to glean some things. There may be some behind the scenes stuff that's going on with the show. You're going to hear a little bit more of some of the work that I've even done with my clients that I'm now exposing through these emails and these newsletters. And what it's also attached to is kind of number 2, which is that we're releasing these weekly momentum builders, these connection exercises that allow you to take these concepts, these practices, some of the lessons you learn on this show as well, and apply them to your life, to take them deeper, to reflect on them more deeply than ever before. So it does make that meaningful difference. What you're also going to do is get an invite to our private Facebook group where the whole community of One Idea Away, so the listeners of this show as well as the contributors we have on our website, all of the members that we've got as part of this community, continue this conversation on that day-to-day and week-to-week basis, including offering support to one another. You'll get invited to that group. You can also find that group by just searching up One Idea Away Community on Facebook and look specifically for the private group. The last thing you're going to do is that when you join, you're going to continually get these invites to the monthly live cast that we've also begun. These are deeper conversations where we get into it with community members, we get into it with experts, and we move the conversation forward from multiple directions on different topics, whether it be on purpose or relationships or career or meaning. And we really dive that down deep, and you've got the chance to interact by posing your questions to us. Throw it in there through Facebook and make sure that we are helping you in a way that really benefits your life, benefits your career and your relationships. And so do me a favor, go to oneideaway.com/join. I really invite you to get involved. And last but not least, do it because I would love to connect with you. It's so meaningful for me to know how this is touching you, how this is reaching you, and also what would help you even more. So do me a favor, join in, join that private Facebook group, get in touch with me, ask me your questions, and I would love to continue to support you through this show, as well as through the One Idea Away community. Thanks so much, and now I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. So let me back us up a little bit then, because I want to walk through some of these, just a couple of key elements here of what you're describing. When we first become aware, when we start to listen to our self-talk, one of the things you described was you started to write down, it's just kind of a specific little practice to write down the different thoughts and the different things and to kind of keep that journal of inner talk. And I know, for myself, having done some of these types of practices and exercises and things like that, first time you do it can be pretty alarming. Right? You can see, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I actually say this and think this to myself, but those thoughts are there all of the time. And I think what was really interesting is that as you listen and you start to hone in on that judgment that's there, one of the other things that you shared was that there seems to be patterns to the self-talk as well. And I found this a little bit enlightening in terms of how this can help us recognize the ways that the self-talk comes up. And I just wanted to call out like one or two, if you could say more. One of those patterns, and I call these out specifically because I think they're a little bit sneakier than some of the other ways that our judgments pop up. And one of the patterns of self-talk is around expectations. I was wondering if you could say more about how expectations play this role in negative self-talk.
Yes. So expectation is a big one for negative self-talk. It's the internal expectation that we have that creates negative self-talk. So if we set ourselves up for something that doesn't happen, we can get very upset with ourselves. This can be, it can be a promotion, it can be weight loss, it could be any goal that we have that we don't reach. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to get down on ourselves for not fulfilling our expectation of who we are. And it becomes a habit, right? This idea of thinking we should be more or thinking we should be doing something. And then when it doesn't happen, to really berate ourselves and make ourselves feel less than because we haven't met that expectation. So a lot of the paying attention and listening is not necessarily to know, okay, in this moment I'm having an expectation, but It's paying attention to the actual language. So, this isn't how I wanted it to be, or this isn't how it's supposed to be, or, I should be, or I'm supposed to be doing X, Y, Z, right? These are kind of little phrases that if you catch yourself saying, it's possible that what you're doing is you're setting yourself up really to be upset with yourself.
Yeah. So let me add it to this, because one of the reasons why I brought this up is around this idea of just even setting goals, right? Yeah. When we set certain goals for ourselves, that's kind of an expectation. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of a big part of our culture. And at the same time, I think what I hear you saying, and I'd love to see where you go with kind of expanding on this. Part of what I hear you saying, if I were to say a goal, what a goal really is doing is setting our direction. It's letting us know kind of the course that we want to be able to set. But the expectation that usually comes in is when we say, well, what if we achieve it? What if we don't achieve it? What does this mean? What does this mean about me? Now, all of a sudden, the judgments creep into our expectations. And it now all of a sudden the goal is so much bigger than it originally was. It's not just a direction. It's like about self-worth and doubt and all of these other things that start to creep in. Mm-hmm. Is that what I'm picking up? So can you just explain? So if that's the case, how do we approach things like goals, meaning the positive expectations or things that we do want to move ourselves towards? How can we move towards them in a manner that is very, very healthy and orient ourselves with that positive self-talk?
Mm-hmm. So the reason why we feel a lot of suffering when we don't achieve a goal is because we've attached to the potential outcome, the expectation, right? The story of what achieving that could do for us. And when it comes to setting goals without being attached to the outcome, it really what it is about is focusing on just the direct experience. So the goal itself, and not attaching a story, not attaching something as being good or bad if it happens or if it doesn't happen, but simply observing the goal itself and moving towards that. So what ends up happening is there's more of a detachment from what could potentially happen, right? Mm-hmm. So in terms of how we talk to ourselves about moving forward or setting a goal, it's less about what the goal can do for us and more about actually reaching the goal itself. Does that make sense?
Sure. And I think so let me extract this, because some conversations I've gotten into before on some of these interviews is I would also, I guess, add is that when we don't over-attach to or completely attach to what that goal, that destination happens to be, it also frees up an amount of our energy, our attention, our engagement to be right here, right? To focus on the process that we're undertaking, the performance that we're undertaking to ultimately achieve some outcome, which makes the outcome more likely to occur, number one.
Yes.
And it also, we know that we're going to be enriched by that process. And because we're going to be enriched, more likely than not, whether we hit the goal or not, we'll have made a certain type of progress or something that propels us, forward in a way that we probably couldn't even have expected if we had been just too completely attached to the goal looking only one way.
Exactly. Yes.
So if we so I kind of orient through all of this, because I think, for all of us in our lives, we're constantly setting goals, we're constantly setting directions, whether it's losing the 10 pounds or shifts in our lifestyle or nutrition or careers or whatever the case may be, right? It's all out there. But what you're really talking about, because I want to tie this back to where it began, is that you're talking about a way of caring for yourself and a way of relating and connecting to yourself in a manner that is very empowering and it sets you up to really go out and get after and achieve and or even just enjoy the process of going after these types of things in your life. And that seems like it's going to make you both a healthier as well as a happier human being as you do.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I think one piece of it is we learn how to be compassionate toward ourselves. And that compassion is really what makes it so that we can reach that goal, right? It's what makes it so that we can change how we're interacting in our relationships, because we're allowing ourselves to be kind to ourselves, right? And by doing that, we become more friendly. And by being more friendly to ourselves, we in turn treat people in kind, right?
Yeah.
So it has a ripple effect for sure.
You know, it's interesting because I was going to ask you about how compassion comes into this, because I do know that that's part of the process when you get into the questions and things like that, especially. But you just triggered something that I think is really interesting. I'm not sure I've ever connected this in my head before, is that with that compassion, because we're willing to see ourselves a little gentler, because we're able to extend that to others as well. It also means that if we're not that attached to certain things, it means we have more flexibility. We're more adaptable. And of course, that can only benefit us to be more adaptable, to be more flexible, to move in a bunch of different directions, like water moving around a stone. The water is going to get to where it wants to go, but it has many, many different ways that it can get there.
Right.
And compassion, am I hearing you in the sense that compassion actually, that's an element of what compassion can help provide to us?
Yes. And I think, and it comes in all different situations and scenarios as well. Like a woman that I was working with the other week, she went to the pediatrician's office with her son and she forgot her wallet. And in that moment, while she was paying attention to the thoughts that were going on, what she was hearing herself saying was, "I'm stupid. I can't believe I just did that.
Right.
Why did I do that?" And instead, she was able to switch into thinking more creatively and thinking, okay, so I've left my wallet. How am I going to be able to leave the parking garage? And so she started to tap into kind of creative energy that she might not have been able to before, right? Simply becoming a little more gentler with herself and a little bit more compassionate. And she was able to leave the garage because she found a new way without having to have her wallet to get out.
Right.
And that whole experience, her self-esteem and her confidence based solely on that just kind of skyrocketed. So it's fascinating, right? How just moving into a little bit more kindness can really open us up to not have one way of doing things, but really showing that there are many ways to, respond in situations and interact with others.
Yeah. So one of the other parts of the process that you described, so for everybody, we talked about listen, we talked about exploring what it is that you're becoming aware of through listening, questioning what it is that you're exploring, and then release. And you talked about release, you connected to forgiveness, but I was hoping you could say a little bit more, because I think this is one of those areas where logically we understand what we mean by release and letting go, and yet doing it is something entirely different. And so how can we learn to release a little bit more as we go? Because this is an extraordinary skill to learn, but it's also one that's a bit difficult for most of us to get, certainly early on in this journey.
I think with forgiveness, it really is something that happens throughout the day, to be able to release negative self-talk or, interactions that have been unhelpful. It's the one way that is, even in 5 minutes of sitting and, closing your eyes and just seeing the interaction that you've had with yourself and forgiving yourself for it is so powerful. And what that means is really, sitting and acknowledging that you've been judging yourself and that, you've said things from time to time that have been hurtful, and allowing that to have happened, and then saying, I forgive you for those things. And it sounds like that small moment wouldn't be so powerful, but it really truly is, because it releases a lot of the tension in the body. It releases a lot of the emotions being held over the judgment and the criticism. And really the most beautiful thing about it is that it allows us to really just be who we are and let us know that we're okay. It's okay that we've had these thoughts. It's okay that maybe we haven't been kind. It doesn't mean that we're a horrible person, right? Yeah. And allowing ourselves to be is really one way to forgive.
Yeah. It is amazing because, as you say, it doesn't maybe seem it's as powerful as it actually can be. And yet, for some, and I've been through this myself with some of my own experiences, sometimes it comes quickly to you and you get that release. And other times you may need to do it a few times, and you may need to, because those thoughts inside of the self-talk have been around for a while with most of us. So it's not always going to release on the first attempt. No. But when you do stick with it, all of a sudden you will have the experience that Cynthia is describing here, which is a really, really powerful one, because you'll feel it as a release. You will feel like a weight is off your shoulders. You'll feel your shoulders go down your back. You'll feel a lightness start to kick in. And in those moments, you do start to realize how much more of yourself you really, truly can be by letting go of the things that you are not. And so it's really, truly a powerful experience. Cynthia, I guess just as we start to kind of close out, this conversation, one of the things that I just wanted to ask you about, and just have you enlighten us a little bit, because I think this is pretty cool, is that I had seen, and it was something that you had mentioned that you had said to your husband, was that walking with a cup of coffee and having a wonderful conversation is all that you crave. It's one of the greatest gifts that you could ever receive. And I'm just curious why that's true for you.
I love interaction. I love conversation, and I also love being outside. And I think for me, it's where I am the most calm, when I am walking and I'm feeling my feet on the ground and I'm listening to the birds and seeing the sun, and then, being with someone that I love and having just words moving back and forth that are kind, and they empower and enhance my world. And I mean, there's nothing more to me than just having that experience with another human being, to be able to learn from them and to share. And for me, it's just everything.
Well, I appreciate that, because those are exactly the types of conversations that we wish to foster as a result of what we share here on One Idea Away and what takes place in our community and everything else, because it does connect us to a deeper sense of self, and it connects us deeper to one another. And so, Cynthia, I want to thank you so much for coming on One Idea Away, for sharing all that you have, and for doing the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
So for everybody out there, again, it's Cynthia Kane is our guest, and she just recently released Talk to Yourself Like a Buddhist. Strongly recommended. It goes into a lot more detail, obviously, in everything that we talked about today, to be able to work through your self-talk. It's really, truly a wonderful narration, a wonderful example of what can be done. And I guess the piece that I would just love to leave you all with today was part of that balance, part of that question, that litmus test that we can throw out to ourselves, that when we hear our self-talk, whether it's the internal thoughts we have running through our head at any given moment, or that moment when we're in the kitchen alone and just carrying on that ongoing dialogue with ourselves, is just to ask yourself, is what I am saying or about to say, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind? And the more that we navigate ourselves to speaking true, to speaking helpful, to speaking with kindness, the more that happens, the more that our lives will change, and the more extraordinary experiences we'll have. So as always, I want to thank you for dropping in on One Idea Away. And until next time, continue to enjoy the journey. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you really enjoyed it, do me a favor, let us know. You can keep the conversation going and send us a message on our Facebook page, which is simply One Idea Away. Go ahead and tag me in the post or even just direct messages. Also, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this episode along with someone that you believe could benefit from hearing the ideas and the messages that we got into. That's pretty much why we do this. So you can just go ahead and share it from your app or email it along, whatever works for you. The point is to share, to talk, to discuss, and keep the dialogue going, because it's in those conversations that ideas can take hold and create profound shifts in perspective. That's what allows us to live life more fully, deeply, and consciously. As always, we would love to see you post a review for the podcast in iTunes or whichever app you're using. And until next time, remember, you're never more than one idea away from a whole new reality. This is Luke Iorio and One Idea Away, signing off.